The phone rang just as I was redlining a set of blueprints, my pencil poised above a stubborn angle I couldn't quite resolve. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. My mother had a habit of switching phones and never explaining why. Aisling, hi sweetie, got a minute? I knew that tone, cheerful, distracted, like she was stirring a pot while pretending this was a casual chat. Yeah, what's going on? Oh, nothing major. Just wanted to let you know. We sold the house. I sat there, pencil still in hand, blinking at the line that now looked foreign on the page. You what? Sold it. Finally. It was time. The market's hot, and we figured it's better to cash out now than wait around. You never mentioned you were even thinking about it. There was a pause, a short exhale on the other end. Well, you've been so busy, and it's not like we needed your permission. It's just a house, sweetheart. No, it wasn't just a house. It was the place where my name was carved under the kitchen table, where I'd cried over college rejection letters in the laundry room. But to her, it was drywall and outdated tile. You didn't think I'd want to know? It was a practical decision. You always say you're not sentimental, right? Families don't owe explanations for doing what's best. She said it like a quote she picked up from a daytime therapist on TV. My chest felt tight, but I kept my voice steady. So, where are you planning to go? Oh, that's the other thing. We're driving down tomorrow. We'll be staying with you for a little while, just until we figure out the next step. I didn't say anything. You're still there? Yeah, I managed. Just surprised. Well, we'll be there around 3. Can't wait to see you, honey. Click. The silence in my studio was sudden and sharp. I had forgotten how loud my parents' SUV was until I heard it grumbling up my driveway the next day. I'd barely gotten back from the grocery store, and there it was, taking up the entire space like it belonged. 2 suitcases sat upright on the porch, flanking the door like sentries. The screen door was half open. I stepped inside to the smell of lavender and lemon-scented something, definitely not mine. Mom? She popped her head out of the kitchen, wearing my apron. You're back! Perfect timing! Behind her, my fridge stood open, half-emptied. A plastic container of something labeled Loiena's Detox Broth sat beside my almond milk. What's going on? We figured we'd get settled while you were out. I left a voicemail. You're already inside? Oh, we got here an hour ago. Hope that's okay. The guest room's lovely, by the way. I put your winter coats in the hall closet for now. I looked down. My slippers, usually tucked neatly at the front door, were shifted. The worn ones I used when pacing the kitchen had been moved to the side. My dad walked in from the patio, silent as ever, holding a newspaper he hadn't paid for. He nodded at me but said nothing. It's just for a little while, sweetie. Until we figure out the next step, Mom said again, like a song she rehearsed. I nodded slowly, still standing with my keys in hand, unsure which territory was still mine. 3 days in, and I noticed the mantel had changed. Gone were the small ceramic vases I'd picked up in Ojai. In their place were framed photos of Loiena, her wedding, her graduation, a vacation she once took to Aspen. I never gave those photos permission to exist here. I found myself tiptoeing in my own hallway. My mother had moved the couch to face the window, claiming the light was better that way. My spices were rearranged in alphabetical order. She relabeled the pantry shelves. You had couscous under S for some reason, she said, like that was the crime of the century. She'd started referring to the kitchen as ours. I said nothing, swallowing my discomfort. The one time I'd invited them over before, years ago, Mom had stood in the middle of the living room and declared, "It's a bit cold, don't you think? All this gray and black? It feels lonely. I built this house for peace. They brought chaos." Each night, I walked slower down the hallway, the walls closing in a little more. I reopened an old journal that had lived untouched in the back of my drawer for years. The pages still smelled like cheap ink and past selves. I wrote, "Temporary has a different meaning in this family." I started to record little things. The way Mom commented on how I folded towels, how Dad left the back door open because it needs air. The constant hum of television reruns. But it wasn't just noise, It was the erasure of quiet. That night, after brushing my teeth, I walked into the master bathroom and froze. There was a blue toothbrush on the counter. Not mine. A not new. Used. I opened the medicine cabinet. 2 pill bottles I didn't recognize sat beside my skincare. I turned toward the bedroom. My door, usually closed, was ajar. Inside, the bed was made. My lamp dimmed, and the faint scent of my mother's perfume clung to the air. I backed out slowly, heart pounding, not from fear, but from a cold, creeping certainty. They didn't ask. They assumed. And if they could move into my house without permission, what else had they already taken without asking? The sound of muffled laughter reached me before I even turned the hallway corner. I stopped just outside the kitchen, my feet sinking slightly into the rug that hadn't been there 3 days ago. It was too plush, too floral. Definitely not mine. Of course, Loiana, we'll help however we can. What's family for? That was my mother's voice, clear and assured, rising above the speakerphone's soft echo. I just need a little more to get through this next phase. After that, the boutique should run itself, Loiana replied. Alethea chuckled. You're always thinking ahead. Your father and I believe in you. I took 1 step back, just out of their line of sight. My hand gripped the edge of the wall. No one had asked me. No one had even told me they were discussing financial plans, again, in my kitchen, in the house they didn't pay for. I think the leftover proceeds should go to something meaningful, Mom added, maybe expanding the brand. That sounds amazing, Loiana said. Aisling doesn't really have plans for it, right? That stung. My name dropped so casually, a footnote in a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. I remembered how I only found out they sold the family house after the ink dried. The deed had been transferred, and no one had said a word. I wasn't angry about the house anymore. It was the pattern, the intentional silence. Silence isn't absence, it's strategy. That's when I realized I wasn't family in that kitchen. I was a witness. Later that night, I stepped into the bathroom and paused. The towels hanging on the rack weren't mine. Soft beige replaced my charcoal gray. A matching soap dispenser labeled Eucalyptus Calm sat on the counter. I opened the drawer. My toothbrush had been moved, tucked beside a tube of toothpaste I didn't buy. In the hallway, I heard drawers opening, Mom rearranging things again, no doubt. When I passed the spare room, she called out, Your father and I were just talking. We really love how cozy our room is now. Our room. Just like that, the language had shifted. It was no longer your guest room. It belonged to them now, in phrasing and function. I walked into the living room and stopped short. The coffee table was gone. In its place stood a bulky wooden trunk I didn't recognize. Where's my table? I asked. It's in the garage, Mom replied, not looking up from her magazine. This one's safer, rounded edges, and it adds character. Yours was too sterile. She said it with a soft smile, as though she were complimenting me. It wasn't sterile, I replied, my voice even. It was intentional. Sweetheart, don't be so sensitive. We're just making it feel more livable. I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen and stood there, surrounded by the scent of her simmering soup, my own home feeling more distant by the minute. I should have said something then. Drawn a line, but I hesitated, and that hesitation cost me. The next evening, I decided to try a different approach. Dinner was quiet for the first few minutes, the clink of forks on ceramic the only sound. I waited until Mom finished her second bite. I wanted to ask if we could keep the studio as a private space, I said. I use it for client work and personal projects. It's where I focus best. Alethea looked up, her fork midair. Oh, but it's the most beautiful room in the house. It would be such a waste to keep it closed off. I'm not closing it off, I said gently. Just asking for it to remain private. It's just a room, Aisling, she said, waving her hand. You're being dramatic. Dad remained silent, chewing methodically, eyes locked on his plate. I tried again. It's not about the space. It's about boundaries. We're family. There shouldn't be boundaries, she snapped, her smile evaporating. This isn't a hotel. There it was. The shift. When I asked for privacy, I became the selfish one. When I asked for space, I was suddenly a stranger. I finished dinner in silence. No one asked why I didn't go back for seconds. That night, I stood in the hallway, looking at the door to my studio. For the first time since I built it, I locked it. The click echoed louder than I expected. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. I wasn't tired. My thoughts swirled, chaotic, tangled. How had it only taken days for my house to feel like borrowed space? I got up and pulled an old cardboard box from the closet labeled MISC. As I sifted through it, a small leather-bound journal fell out. My childhood diary. I flipped it open. The pages were full of cramped writing, odd sketches, teenage ramblings. And there it was, the very first line I ever wrote in it. When I grow up, I'll live in a house that's mine. Just mine. They'd found this box, labeled it kitchen supplies. They went through my private things. I closed the book and sat quietly, the weight of it in my hands. When someone feels entitled to your space, they're already halfway to erasing your voice. And if locking the door makes me the villain, then what does that make the people who barged in without asking? I returned from a jog, sweat still drying on my skin, my keys clinking in hand, only to find strangers gathered across my lawn like they belonged there. The scent of charcoal smoke drifted from the backyard, mixing with the sickly sweetness of canned fruit punch and the faint bitterness of cheap cologne. There were folding chairs, paper plates, and unfamiliar voices calling out greetings I didn't recognize. My name didn't come up once. "Where should I put this potato salad?" a woman asked, balancing a tray as she passed me in the hallway. "Just on the counter, dear," Mom called out from behind the grill. I stood still in my own entryway, sneakers damp against the hardwood, watching as a man in khakis and a denim jacket complimented the landscaping I had done with my own hands 2 summers ago. "It's so generous of your sister," someone said from the patio, "letting your parents move in like that. And in this gorgeous house?" I didn't know who the comment was directed toward, but I knew it wasn't me. I moved quietly, slipping past a stack of soda cans into the kitchen. My mother was tossing a salad like she'd lived there forever. "You're hosting a party?" I asked. "It's not a party, just a little get-together. Some of your father's old co-workers, a few neighbors." "You didn't tell me." "I left a note, on the fridge." There was no note. She looked up, smiling. "You know how these things go. Besides, we wanted to celebrate. It's a big step for your sister." "Big step? You mean the money?" "Yes, $720,000, Aisling. Can you believe it? She's finally going to launch that boutique she's always dreamed of. Took everything we had left from the sale." My grip on the counter tightened. "You sold the house and gave her all of it?" "Of course. Loiena has vision. She's going to make something of herself." "We just helped support it." "And me? What about you?" I had no answer. I watched as Loiena arrived fashionably late in a white linen dress, heels clicking on the patio tiles like she owned the foundation beneath her. People clapped when she hugged our parents. Someone shouted, "To new beginnings!" She took it in stride, waving softly to the crowd before accepting a glass of sangria from someone I didn't recognize. Alethea tapped a fork against a wine glass. "Everyone, thank you for being here. We just wanted to say how proud we are of our daughter. Her business, her drive, her ambition. She's taking bold steps, and we couldn't be happier to support her." Applause. "And the house? Well, we figured it was time to let go of the old place. And what better way to reinvest than to believe in your child?" She turned to Loiena. "You've always had vision, darling. We believe in you." The last time I asked them for help, I needed a small loan to fix my car after an accident. "You're the independent one," my mother had said then. "You don't need us." But here they were, giving everything to the one who never paid a bill in her life. I stayed quiet. I sat near the sliding door, halfway between the kitchen and the yard, where the hum of voices couldn't reach me. My plate was untouched. Alethea used my serving spoons, my glassware, my tablecloth. I watched her cut cake for a guest, laughing like she hadn't just rewritten the narrative of our family to fit someone else's spotlight. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the applause. They clapped for her like she built something, like she sacrificed. But the only thing she gave up was responsibility, and somehow that earned her a standing ovation. I slipped away, walking down the hall slowly. Every step sounded louder than it should have, the house no longer echoing with my rhythm. In the living room, I could still hear them laughing. My name never came up. Dad passed me in the hallway, nodded again, silent as always. Even now, he couldn't look me in the eye. Later, as the evening wound down, Alethea stood with a wineglass raised. "To family," she said, "and to foresight. We wouldn't be where we are without Loiena's courage to dream big." I stood just behind the patio curtain, watching the clapping. No one noticed the empty chair at the end of the patio table. The one seat no one had touched, the one I never took. That chair was mine, not by invitation, but by inheritance, and it sat untouched, ignored. A perfect metaphor. As they raised their glasses to her success, I finally realized this was no accident. It was a rewriting of history where I didn't exist. The night after the barbecue, everything felt colder, even though the weather had barely changed. I lit a candle in the kitchen, not for the scent, but just to remind myself I was still in control of at least one small flame in this house. Dinner was quiet at first. Dad chewed slowly, like he was working through something deep in his jaw. Alethea spooned pasta onto her plate with exaggerated grace, like we were all guests on some cooking show she hosted. "I rearranged the pantry," she said without looking up. "Your spices were in chaos, no labels facing forward." I kept my focus on the fork in my hand. She pushed her plate slightly forward. "Honestly, I don't know how you function in this house sometimes." "I functioned just fine before," I said, steady. She hummed. "Well, maybe if things didn't feel so cold, we wouldn't need to make it feel like home." Loiena chimed in from across the table. "You've always been distant, Aisling. Even when we were little, you had that leave-me-alone face." I turned to her. "You mean the face I made when people took what didn't belong to them?" "Oh, come on," she laughed. "Don't be dramatic." I set down my fork. "I'm not being dramatic, I'm being honest. There's a difference." Alethea dabbed her lips with a napkin, theatrically. "You know, you've always needed so much space. That's why things feel so tense now." The room stilled. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. "You all keep saying I'm the problem, that I need too much. But I'm the only one here respecting what belongs to someone else." No one responded, not even a glance. That was the moment I realized they weren't ignoring me. They didn't think I had anything worth hearing. That night, I sat in my room with a yellow legal pad and a cheap pen, listing out rules like I was drafting a ceasefire agreement. It felt strange, formal, even petty, until I looked around and realized my life had turned into a boarding house I didn't agree to. The studio is private. Kitchen items return to original placement. Shared spaces must be discussed before rearranging. No entering my bedroom without consent. Emotional conversations require agreement from both parties to engage. I didn't care if they laughed. The next morning, I laid the paper on the kitchen table. It sat there like an unopened package, humming with tension. Alethea walked in first. She read the list in silence, then laughed. "This isn't a college dorm, honey." Dad entered, glanced at the paper, then busied himself at the coffee machine. I stood my ground. "This is my home. I've asked nicely. Now I'm asking with structure." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. "Structure? You think we need rules?" "No," I said. "I need boundaries, and I don't need your approval to have them." She opened her mouth to argue, then paused. "Now, you really think this is how family treats each other?" I met her gaze. "If boundaries upset you, maybe you were never here to respect them in the first place." That afternoon, I returned home after a quick grocery run and walked straight to the studio. Something felt off. I opened the door. The rug, my rug, was gone. In its place was an old worn Persian piece I hadn't seen since childhood. I found my rug rolled and shoved behind the garage freezer like it was junk. Alethea passed the hallway and smiled when she saw me. I thought this one had more character. That one of yours, what was it, beige? Felt too cold for the room. You moved it? She raised an eyebrow. Yes, you're welcome. I looked back at the studio, my work setup, my creative space, compromised without a second thought. You don't live here, I said. She blinked. Excuse me? This isn't yours to change. Loiena appeared from the kitchen, holding a mason jar of cucumber water like she was in a spa ad. Aisling, seriously, you're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I replied. You are. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't shout. I walked to the garage, dragged my rug back in, and replaced it. Slowly, purposefully. The old one. I rolled it and left it in the middle of the hallway like an eviction notice. That night, I sat in my car in the garage. It was the only space untouched, sealed from the air they'd infected. My hands gripped the steering wheel like I was waiting for a green light that would never come. Every quiet decision I made, they labeled it rebellion. Every pause became proof that I was difficult. I thought about asking them to leave. I thought about the fallout, the guilt, the performance that would follow. But more than that, I thought about who I was becoming in this silence. And if standing up for myself meant I had to be the villain, then maybe it was time they learned what that really looked like. 3 days after I posted the house rules, things had returned to a strained version of normal. Alethea avoided eye contact most mornings, clattering dishes a bit louder than necessary. Dad still disappeared behind his paper like that counted as neutrality. And Loiena, well, she carried on like she was running for office, smiles for show, silence for substance. I was halfway through reviewing client sketches when my phone buzzed. A message from Morgan, an old college roommate I hadn't spoken to in months. Is this your house? She wrote, followed by a screenshot of an Instagram post. There it was. A perfectly filtered photo of the living room, my living room, bathed in warm light. A throw blanket I didn't own draped across the arm of the couch, a vase of fresh lilies staged on the coffee table. My coffee table, now accessorized like a showroom piece. The caption read, "Home is where family lets you start again." So grateful to my sister for welcoming our parents into her space with love. The post had over 200 likes. Dozens of comments poured in. You're an angel, Loiena. Such a beautiful soul. She's always been the responsible one. I wasn't tagged, not once. Reading it felt like watching someone repaint your childhood home while insisting it was always theirs. She didn't just hijack my space, she stole my story. And people believed it. They applauded her for a gesture she never made. They clapped for a generosity she never offered. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the phone down. I sat there, staring at the post like it was written in a language I didn't recognize, realizing that I had officially been edited out of the narrative. I hovered over the comment box more than once. Part of me wanted to write, "Actually, I own the house." Another part of me remembered what happened the last time I corrected a family member in public. Accusations of betrayal. Whispers behind my back. The private group chats I was never part of. I closed the app. Instead, I unfollowed her, then muted her entirely. Screenshots went into a new folder labeled documentation. I didn't feel petty. I felt smart. Sometimes silence isn't retreat. It's a red flag being folded until you need to wave it. And I had a feeling I'd need it soon. That night, I printed the screenshot and filed it away with my property records. I wasn't planning a battle, but I wasn't walking into one unarmed either. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about how easily truth could be replaced by performance, and how comfortably people clapped for the louder voice. The next afternoon, I stepped into the studio to clear my head. My breath caught the second I crossed the threshold. My desk was gone. In its place sat a heavy antique with claw feet and gold drawer pulls. It looked like something pulled from a courthouse in the 1800s. I turned slowly, scanning the room like I'd walked into a stranger's office. My desk, oak, hand-built, custom-fit for the corner lighting, was missing. I found it leaning against the garage wall like discarded furniture. Loiena appeared behind me, arms crossed. "It's more elegant, don't you think?" Yours was too plain. This one has history. You moved it without asking? It didn't match the energy of the space, she said, like she was staging a magazine shoot. My hands clenched at my sides. I built that desk. Well, this one came from Dad's law office. It means something. To you, I said. Not to me. She sighed like I was being difficult. You're overreacting. I didn't respond. I walked past her, opened the garage, and began dragging my desk back in. It scraped the concrete with a deep, unrelenting sound. She didn't offer to help. Neither did Mom, who peeked in from the kitchen and quickly vanished. Once I got it back in place, I drilled it to the floor. 4 thick bolts, 2 per leg. If they wanted to move it again, they'd have to tear the house apart. That night, I sat cross-legged in bed with my laptop propped on a pillow. I reopened an old blog I hadn't touched in years. Quiet Ownership. That had been the name. I updated the layout, stripped it back to clean white and slate blue, and typed my first entry. A photo of my desk. 1 line beneath it. This space wasn't gifted. It was built. I hit publish without hesitation. Then I opened a new document, one titled simply, Truth. I began typing bullet points, names, dates, pictures, documents. Everything I'd stayed silent about. They wanted to tell their version of the story. Fine, but if they wanted to rewrite my story, I'd make sure they had to plagiarize it first. It was late Friday when the email came. I had just finished logging invoices for a new client, my back sore, eyes dry, when the notification pinged on my screen. The subject line read, "Follow up on the boutique." I almost deleted it without looking, figured it was spam. But the sender's name caught my attention, Amanda Weller. That name dragged up a half-forgotten memory of being at Loiena's birthday dinner 4 years ago. Amanda had sat across from me, talked about crystals and essential oils like they were currency. I clicked. It wasn't intended for me. The message chain included my name by accident, a forward maybe, or a misclick. Whatever it was, the contents were clear. The boutique had failed, months ago, quietly, without the glossy Instagram updates to show it. And attached was a PDF. Amanda had forwarded financial documents for review. Curious turned to concerned. I opened the file. There they were. 6 separate transfers, all in round numbers. $50,000 here. $80,000 there. The total skimmed past $300,000. All sent from a business account I recognized, one Loiena had created using the money from the house sale. But it wasn't the amounts that made my stomach turn. It was the recipient, Corey, her ex, the one who wore Italian leather shoes to backyard barbecues, the one who borrowed her credit cards and once tried to start a record label with no music. He was supposed to be long gone. I closed my laptop and stared at the reflection in the window, my face pale, unmoving, like the glass was holding its breath for me. You don't misplace $300,000. You reassign it, with purpose. And my sister? She didn't just fail at a dream. She funded someone else's life behind our backs. I couldn't sleep that night. I pulled up my credit report, not because I suspected anything, but because I needed to feel some sense of control. The numbers loaded slowly. I scrolled, expecting the usual. But there, buried among lines I didn't recognize, was a card I'd never opened. Active. With a balance. $6,042.38, interest accumulating. Opened 3 years ago. Mailing address matched a location my parents had briefly used while between homes. I sat back, stunned. I hadn't just been erased, I'd been used. I called the bank to confirm the details. The agent was polite, overly cheerful. Yes, the card had been opened under my name. No, I didn't need to provide ID. I already had. 3 years ago. I hung up and stood in the middle of the living room, the silence around me so loud it pressed against my temples. I walked to the hallway and knocked gently on my parents' door. Alethea answered. Her robe was pressed, her face calmly indifferent. There's a credit card in my name, I said. Used for thousands of dollars. You opened it. She blinked. We had to. It was a family emergency. You didn't tell me. We meant to pay it off. You didn't. She frowned. Aisling, families do things for each other. That's what this is. I turned and walked away before she could finish. I didn't need to hear her justification. I didn't want to witness the mask stay on. The dining table was set when I got home the next evening. Takeout boxes lined the center like offerings on a shrine. Thai food, Loiena's latest obsession. My seat was still empty. I dropped my purse, walked to my room, and came back with a manila folder. I sat down, opened it, and slid 2 pieces of paper across the table. "What's this?" Alethea asked, chopsticks mid-air. "Bank statements, credit card records, transfers to Corey." Loiena blinked. "Corey? Who?" "Don't play stupid," I said, voice steady. "You know who." Dad glanced at the papers, then looked down again. Same as always. Alethea folded her napkin neatly. "Where did you get these?" "They were sent to me, mistakenly." But that mistake cleared everything up. "I didn't send money to Corey," Loiena said, too fast. "I have 6 documented transfers. I have dates. I have emails. You funneled family money to a man who ghosted you twice." Alethea reached for the papers. I pulled them back. "You're going to explain this," I said, "or you're going to pack." Silence. "I'm not your scapegoat, Loiena. I'm your ledger, and I just closed the books." No one touched their food. The next morning, I made coffee alone. No one else was up. I walked the perimeter of the house like a guard checking for breaches. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No voices. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the wall clock. I opened my laptop and called a credit attorney. We discussed fraud reporting, identity theft, legal options. She walked me through the first steps with calm precision. Afterward, I sat by the window and watched the neighbor's dog chase a squirrel up the tree line. It felt absurd how normal the world looked while mine had just been cracked open. They taught me silence keeps families together, but it also keeps thieves hidden. And if family loyalty means covering for criminals, then maybe I've been loyal to the wrong people all along. The clinking of dishes was louder than it needed to be. I hadn't even made it into the kitchen yet, but I could already hear Alethea's voice rising and falling, tight, controlled, full of that smug exasperation she reserved especially for me. "I don't care how she spins it," she said. "You know she's always kept herself separate from the family. Now she's surprised we treat her like she's distant?" Loiena chuckled. "She's just jealous the spotlight shifted. It was bound to." I stepped through the doorway, arms folded, silent. Neither of them stopped talking. Alethea turned to me casually, like she'd known I was there all along. "You know, if you cared half as much about this family as you do about your space, none of this would be necessary." I tilted my head. "Necessary? You mean the theft, the lying, or the erasure?" She ignored the jab. "You've always made it hard to be close. You've always needed a wall between you and everyone else." "I needed boundaries," I said, sharp. "There's a difference. You keep acting like the victim. You opened a credit card in my name and drained it." Loiena raised an eyebrow. "Mom said it was an emergency." "You mean the boutique scam? Or Corey's apartment deposit?" Alethea's eyes narrowed. "You're being ungrateful, after everything we've tried to do for you." "That's the problem," I said, voice steady. "You didn't do anything for me. You did everything to preserve the version of this family that makes you look like the good guy." Their silence wasn't denial. It was deflection. In their story, I wasn't just the problem. I was the reason they failed at being better people. And the more I spoke, the clearer it became. They needed me to stay silent so their fantasy held up. So I left the kitchen, not storming, not crying, just done. Later that day, I logged onto Zoom for my niece's birthday party. I hadn't planned to stay long. I knew what I was walking into. The screen filled with smiling faces, balloons taped to beige walls, paper hats slightly askew. Loiena sat center frame, holding her daughter on her lap, her voice bright and polished like a children's show host. Alethea leaned into the camera. "Say hi to your Aunt Loiena's little sister." The birthday girl giggled. "Hi, Mommy's sister." Not Aunt Ashling, not even my name, just a footnote again. I smiled politely, waved, then quietly clicked, "Leave meeting." I stared at the laptop for a full minute, letting the screen go black. Names aren't just words, they're blueprints for how people treat you, and I'd just been redrawn. Again. The next morning, I walked into my studio, locked the door behind me, and began making changes. I replaced the doorknob with a coded lock, printed a sign, "Private, do not enter." Screwed it directly into the wood. I knew they'd be offended. I didn't care. By noon, the passive-aggressive comments had already started. "You're treating us like intruders," Luana said, arms crossed, blocking the hallway. "Families don't lock doors," Alethea added. "Families," I said, "don't force themselves where they're not wanted." That shut them up, for the moment. The rest of the day passed in stiff silence. Every footstep felt like a challenge, every glance a negotiation. In the evening, I went to reorganize some boxes. Tucked behind an old suitcase, I found my childhood diary, at least what was left of it, pages torn, others scribbled over in bright marker, my handwriting buried under doodles and crude captions. That wasn't an accident. That was a message. They weren't just stepping on my space. They were trying to erase my history, replace it with a version they could manage, piece by piece. That night, I sat across from Alethea at the kitchen table. The air was brittle. "I want you both out," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me? You have 2 weeks. You're kicking your parents out?" "No, I'm setting boundaries, the kind that matter." "You'll regret this," she said, her voice trembling. "Families don't turn on each other." I stood. "Families don't use love as a leash either." Luana stepped in. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I replied. "But it'll be my mistake. Not one inherited from a lie." I walked to the garage, sat in the car, turned on the interior light, and opened my journal. If this house has to burn for me to be free, then hand me the match. The garage had become my sanctuary again. With the rain starting to mist against the concrete driveway and the sky churning into a soft gray, I took the excuse to clean. Not the performative type of cleaning. This was quiet, private, compulsive. I pulled down boxes one by one. Most were labeled in my handwriting, but one caught my eye. Old taxes. The handwriting was Mom's. I set it on the workbench, sliced through the packing tape with a key from my ring, and started thumbing through the folders. Old receipts, manila envelopes. Then something at the very bottom, sealed, addressed to me. My fingers went cold. The envelope was thick, heavier than it looked. I opened it carefully, unfolding each page like it might disintegrate if I moved too fast. It was a will. The original. From my grandmother. There, in bold type and clean legal formatting, it read, "To my granddaughter Aisling, I leave 50% of the proceeds of the sale of the family home." No mention of Luana. No conditional phrasing, no ambiguity. I blinked once, twice, then again, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. Alethea's version, the one that had been used to justify emptying the account, was dated 6 months after this one. You don't forget to mention a daughter in a will. You erase her deliberately. I photocopied every page. I didn't confront anyone, not yet. I just filed it all into a folder labeled undeniable. Then I locked it in my studio drawer. Not because I feared they'd destroy it, because I knew they would. That afternoon, while checking balances for a donation I was planning, I logged into the foundation's account. The screen loaded slower than usual, giving me time to sip my coffee and think through the next few emails. Then it hit me. The balance was nearly zero. $18,400. Gone. I scrolled through the withdrawal history. The entries were clean, quiet, monthly, almost symmetrical. 2 stood out immediately. The recipient was listed as Luana Ventures, LLC. I froze. My stomach twisted, then dropped. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about the kids, the art students who applied every semester, hoping for just enough to afford a camera, a laptop, a chance. She didn't just steal from me, she stole from students who trusted us. The rage didn't come fast, it seeped in slowly, like fog on a mirror, distorting, then clarifying. I printed everything, made copies, labeled them. This time, I wasn't waiting for lightning to strike. I was going to bring the storm myself. Dinner that night was another parade of fake normalcy. Plastic containers lined the table, green curry, fried tofu, steamed rice. I sat down last. No one looked up. I waited, ate nothing, sipped water. Dessert came, mango sticky rice in white styrofoam. I stood, walked to the center of the table, and laid down 2 documents. The room went quiet. "What's this?" Alethea asked, already bristling. "The original will," I said, "and the withdrawal records from the foundation." She didn't touch them, but her posture shifted. Loiena blinked at the papers, tilting her head like they were in another language. "What is this?" she asked. I didn't respond. "I don't know anything about that," she added. "Stop lying," I said, calm, flat. "I traced the transfers. I saw the accounts. You used donor funds to pay off personal expenses and fake business costs." "That's not true," I turned to Alethea. "You approved a will revision that excluded me. You pushed a narrative that this was about fairness, and then you let her raid the money meant for students who actually needed it." Her lips parted, but no words came. "This isn't a confrontation," I said, lifting the documents again. "It's an audit." No one spoke for the rest of dinner. Plates were cleared in silence. The microwave beeped once. Rain tapped the windows like an impatient guest. The next morning, I made the announcement. "You have until Sunday to return every penny or I press charges." Loiena sat stiffly at the edge of the couch. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "This isn't a home anymore," I said, voice sharp. "It's a crime scene." Alethea stood with her arms crossed. "You really want to throw away this family over money?" "It's not the money. It's the theft. It's the lies. It's pretending you didn't see what you saw." Aurelia stayed seated. Quiet. Cowardly. He stared at the floor like it might offer him an exit. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Alara. "Whatever you decide, I'm ready." I looked around. No one apologized. No one admitted anything, but no one denied it anymore either. I didn't cry, didn't raise my voice. I opened the door and stepped outside. The wind tugged at my sleeves, and as the storm rolled in behind me, I realized I wasn't afraid of thunder anymore. The rain had stopped, but the house felt heavier. It wasn't just the weather. There was a pressure in the air, something dense and unmoving. I woke early, long before anyone else. The light slipping through the blinds was dull, gray, hesitant. When I walked into the kitchen, I found Dad sitting at the table, his usual spot, coffee already in hand, paper open like it was any other Saturday. But it wasn't. I waited for him to look up. He didn't. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly. I didn't say anything right away, just watched the steam rising from his cup, curling into nothing. After what felt like an hour of silence, he muttered without lifting his eyes, "I just want peace." That sentence, that pitiful, cowardly sentence, I wasn't asking for a fight. I was asking for a witness. Instead, he chose comfort. He chose the safety of neutrality in a house full of betrayal. And I realized then, his silence hadn't protected me. It had protected them. I stood without saying a word. He didn't stop me. Later that morning, I stepped out onto the porch and called Ayala. I hadn't spoken to him since the confrontation. Not properly. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," I said. "Hey," he repeated. Then a pause. "I know things have been a lot," I began. "I just needed to hear something real. From someone real." He sighed. "Aisling, I don't even know what to say. This whole thing, it's gotten so toxic. Maybe you just need space. Time to sort through all of it." There it was. Not a breakup, just a retreat. "You didn't come by last night," I said. "Or call. Not even a text." "I didn't know what to say," he replied. "You didn't need to say anything. Just showing up would have been enough." More silence. "Look, I care about you. I do. But so, I also need peace. And this isn't peaceful." "Thanks for being honest," I said. And then I ended the call. No shouting, no closure. Just a conversation that ended too early, like so many others in my life. Sometimes people don't leave. They just stop arriving. The house was too quiet. Not calm, vacant, emotionally gutted. I walked from room to room, each space cleaner than I'd ever seen it, sanitized, scrubbed of meaning. In the living room, I found one of my old sketches in the trash. A charcoal piece I drew when I was 22. Angular lines, stormy motion. It had been framed once. Now it was bent at the corners, creased like a forgotten receipt. I didn't pull it out. I just stared at it. In the hallway, picture frames had been straightened. The rug had been vacuumed. It looked like a rental listing, a house with no personality. Every space felt borrowed. I wandered into the guest room, the one they'd claimed as theirs. Pillows fluffed. Her scarf still tossed casually over the back of my chair. In the studio, my desk sat steady where I'd drilled it, but even there, the air felt occupied. Not by people, but by their presence, their scent, their judgment, their fingerprints on everything sacred. I sat down on the floor in the hallway and cried. Not the cinematic kind. No gasping, no fists, just quiet tears falling onto my jeans, soaking through the denim. I had been erased in my own handwriting, but after crying, there was stillness, and in that stillness, clarity. That night, I took out a blank sheet of paper, not to sketch, to write. A letter. "Dad," I began. "You once told me integrity is what you do when no one's looking. So why did you look away? Why did you fold your hands and pretend not to hear? You taught me that good people don't hide, that they speak up, that they protect. But when it was time to protect me, you stayed quiet. You let them lie. You let them steal. You watched your daughter disappear from the family she helped carry. And you said nothing." I stared at the page, the ink still fresh, smudging slightly under my fingertips. I didn't want revenge. I wanted acknowledgement. And I realized then, I might never get it. I wrote the last line slowly, deliberately. "I forgive you, but I won't forget you stayed silent." I folded the paper, slid it into a drawer I rarely opened, not because I expected to revisit it, but because I needed to store the truth somewhere safe. And if silence was your way of surviving this family, then I finally understand why I won't survive it the same way. The manila envelope was heavy in my hands. I hadn't expected it, didn't recognize the return address until I turned it over and saw the embossed seal, my grandmother's attorney. I slid it open with the edge of my keys and unfolded the single-page letter inside. It was formal, sterile, just a brief statement notifying me that I had been formally removed from the amended will. No warning, no consultation, no phone call. The air in my chest tightened. I sat down on the edge of the porch, the morning sun cool on my back. I remembered every Sunday I spent with her, bringing her groceries, walking her dog, helping her figure out how to use the voice commands on her phone. And Loiena? She rarely showed up. When she did, it was always for 5 minutes, and only when there was something to gain. It wasn't just theft, it was succession by deception. I grabbed my phone, dialed Alara. "We're contesting it," I said. "You sure?" she asked. "Yes. I'm done letting them rewrite everything." There was a pause on the line. "If they rewrote the ending," I said, my voice calm, "I'm writing the epilogue." By mid-afternoon, Alara forwarded me a flyer for a local community banquet. A friend of hers thought I should see it. I opened the file. My sister's name was printed in bold across the top. Honoring Loiena D. for her philanthropic leadership and contributions to art mentorship in underserved communities. I stared at the screen. That program was mine, my money, my structure, my mentorship model. And now it had a new face, a stolen one. "You should go," Alara said when I called her. Not for confrontation, for clarity. I didn't respond right away. Later that evening, I slipped on a blazer, simple black pants, and flat shoes. No makeup, no announcement. I entered the event hall quietly, through the side. The lights were low, the stage set, the tables arranged in concentric circles. No one looked twice. I wasn't expected. I wasn't mentioned. I was invisible again. But this time I was watching. I sat at a table in the back, the only seat left open, of course, an empty chair, just like the one at the barbecue, and once again, it fit me perfectly. Halfway through the event, a local councilman took the stage and began reading a list of honorees. He spoke glowingly about innovation, about generosity, about courage. Then he paused. And we also want to acknowledge the early mentorship structure created by, well, I don't have a name here, but the original outline inspired what we now know as the LD Foundation. I stood up. I'm Aisling, I said. Heads turned. I designed that program. Every workshop, every structure. I funded it. It wasn't named for me, but it was built by me. Silence followed. Then someone clapped. Just once. Then another. Loiana, seated near the front, froze. Her fork hovered mid-air. Alethea sat beside her, stiff and tight-lipped. I didn't walk to the stage. I didn't make a scene. I didn't come for revenge, I said from the floor. I came to reclaim my name. The clapping wasn't thunderous. It didn't need to be. It was real. And it was mine. That night, I returned home and pulled the frame down from the family wall in the hallway, the one that held my childhood photo. I didn't replace it with another picture. I left it empty. A space reclaimed. Then I opened the filing cabinet, sorted all legal records, scanned every document, and placed them in a fireproof safe. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel hollow. I just felt finished. As I turned the key in the front door and pulled it shut behind me, I didn't look back. Some legacies are inherited, but others, you have to carve out with steady hands and no permission. Monday morning sunlight cut across the kitchen tile in quiet lines, slicing through a house that now echoed with too much space. I padded across the floor barefoot, coffee in one hand, the mail in the other. At the bottom of the pile was a thick envelope with a familiar crest, an invitation. I slid my thumb under the flap and pulled out ivory cardstock edged in gold. A wedding. My cousin's daughter. But the address label read, Loiana and guest. My address. I flipped through the RSVP insert. A table of names listed under additional attendees from Loiana's family. No mention of me. Not by name. Not by title. They didn't forget me, I whispered. They refiled me. It didn't sting like it used to. It felt inevitable. A family that spent years acting like I didn't belong had simply made it official. This wasn't rejection anymore. It was pattern, and patterns can be broken. By noon, I had filled 4 cardboard boxes with a lifetime of emotional clutter. Old birthday cards with handwriting that once meant something. Photos where I was smiling beside people who'd already decided to misremember me. Mugs, magnets, trinkets, souvenirs from a narrative I no longer belonged to. I picked up a dusty snow globe from a trip to Tahoe, turned it over in my hand, then dropped it gently into the donation pile. Do I own this? I asked myself aloud. Or does it own me? Later, I drove to the local donation center. No fanfare, no dramatic gestures, just one more thing I was letting go of. I began sleeping in my studio that night, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It was the only room that still felt like mine. I replaced the curtains, moved my sketchbooks back in, hung a single frame over the desk, a print that simply read, claimed. They can rename me in their stories, but in mine, I'm finally the author. On Wednesday, I made the call. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. The locks are changing this Friday, I said. A pause on the line. If you need anything, let me know before then. Alethea's voice came soft and coiled. You'll regret turning your back on blood. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn my back, I said. I just stopped waiting for you to face me. She tried again. We're still your family, Aisling. That has to mean something. It does, I replied. It means I know where not to expect safety anymore. There was silence on her end. No yelling, no pleas, no apologies. I hung up, heart steady. That night, I packed the last of their forgotten things into labeled bins and set them by the door. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. It wasn't closure they gave me. It was clarity. The hallway was quiet as I walked past the family photo wall. The frame I'd left empty still hung in the center, like a blank eye staring back at history. I thought about putting something new in it. A solo photo. A landscape. A quote. But then I stopped. Leaving it empty was the point. It reminded me not of what was lost, but what I reclaimed. Later, I sat down and opened my blog, the one I had abandoned for years, then resurrected in protest. I wrote a single line. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's just not needing to explain anymore. I didn't click publish right away. I read it again. Then I closed the laptop without saving. The healing wasn't the post. It was knowing I didn't need to prove anything anymore. They had their story. Now I had mine. I may not have fixed the family, but I rebuilt the foundation of myself. And if letting go means losing them, then maybe what I needed was never theirs to give. It was just after 7 when the knock came, not the heavy kind, but hesitant, uneven. I opened the door only as far as the chain would allow. Alethea stood there, her hands wrapped around 2 overstuffed tote bags. Her eyes were glassy, red at the corners. She didn't say hello. "Aurelia's sick," she whispered, from the stress. I leaned against the frame, said nothing. "We've been your family your whole life. You can't just—" Her voice broke. "You can't just erase us." I waited. Let her keep going. "Don't break this family apart over money and space, Aisling. We're blood. We've made mistakes, sure, but haven't you ever made any?" She searched my face for softness, for guilt, for something familiar she could hook into and reel back toward her version of reality. I let her finish, then exhaled once through my nose. "You already broke it," I said calmly. "I'm just cleaning up what's left." Her posture stiffened. She pulled the oldest trick from the book, the one lined with sharpened edges. "Your father could die without peace because of you." I didn't blink. "He'll have to live with his silence," I said. "I'll live with my truth." I closed the door without another word. At 9 a.m. sharp, the locksmith pulled up. "You want the whole house rekeyed?" he asked. "All exterior doors, all interior locks, except my studio," I said. "That one's already mine." He nodded and got to work. Every click of a lock turning felt like a punctuation mark at the end of a long, run-on sentence. Elara arrived 20 minutes later. She didn't come to talk. She came to witness, clipboard in hand, documenting the rekeying process as I walked the locksmith room to room. Each old key was sealed in an envelope, labeled History, and dropped in a shoebox I planned to store but never reopen. We were halfway through when tires screeched outside. Loiena. She stormed up the driveway yelling my name, calling me a thief, a traitor, a heartless sister. I didn't go outside. I watched her through the blinds, her face distorted by the glass and sunlight. Then I whispered under my breath, "Not today." The locksmith turned to me once it was done. "This the last door?" I nodded. The lock clicked into place. "This," I said, "is what a boundary sounds like. It clicks when it locks." That evening, I refreshed my blog dashboard out of habit. The post from 2 days ago, "Inheritance Isn't Always Money," had over 400,000 views. Emails flooded in, messages from women I'd never met, from towns I'd never heard of. "Thank you for saying what we couldn't. I've lived this. You gave it words. Your voice matters. We see you." Some messages were from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. One from a distant cousin read, "I always knew something was off about them. Proud of you." And just like that, the narrative shifted. Not in grand, dramatic explosions, but in quiet conversions. In truths that outlived the lies. I didn't burn the bridge, I just refused to carry them across it anymore. Later that night, I pulled down the empty frame still hanging in the hallway. I didn't reach for a childhood photo this time. Instead, I printed a picture taken just last week. Me, sitting cross-legged in the studio, hands covered in paint, a streak of color across my cheek, alone, focused, unapologetically present. I slid it into the frame and hung it back on the wall. Beside it, I taped a strip of paper with a single quote, "You don't need their permission to be unforgettable." The studio smelled of turpentine and late summer heat. I opened my journal and flipped to a fresh page. I didn't write about them. I didn't write to them. I wrote this. Today, I begin again, not from nothing, from everything I survived. And if they ever knock again, I won't open the door. I'll leave the frame empty, just like they taught me.